Hey guys, if you were born a seahorse, it would begin like this. A swirl, a twitch, a blink of oceanic light filtered through drifting plankton and cloudy shallows, barely noticeable, even to the creatures closest to you. You're smaller than a pinhead, a sliver of twitching life expelled from the safety of your father's pouch into the open water with no announcement, no applause, no warm welcome. You spin, drift, and immediately, instinct kicks in, not in a dramatic, world-shaping way, but in a quiet, ancient tug that tells you to find something, anything, to hold on to. You won't survive this. Statistically speaking, you're fish food before you even understand what you is. But somehow, against every odd nature has thrown at your kind, you do survive. You persist, you bob, you blur against the light like an unfinished sketch, and you begin to live. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And feel free to drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where everyone is listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You begin in warm water, sunlit from above, shallow enough that light still paints ripples on the sand, but deep enough that your tiny body doesn't cast a shadow anyone would notice. You are not alone, though you feel alone, and that sensation never quite goes away throughout your life. You're born alongside hundreds of siblings, sisters, brothers, and who knows what else, all of you ejected at once in a sort of underwater sneeze. Your father, the one who carried you, doesn't linger for introductions. He gives one final twitch, expelling the last of you into the world, then swims off slowly to recover, leaving you and your cohort to figure it out or perish trying. There is no cradle, no reef nursery, no protective kelp curtain, just the open water, full of light and motion and things with gaping mouths. For hours, you tumble, not swimming, not really. Your tail, at this stage, is more of a curly ribbon than a functioning limb, and your body lacks the skill or structure to do anything useful. You mostly drift, tumbling slowly, like a feather caught in a breeze. Currents tug you, not unkindly, but with no regard for your preference. A ripple pushes you this way, a sudden current that way. Sometimes you're caught in eddies that spin you in slow, dreamy circles for what feels like entire afternoons. Other times you are jostled among bubbles, flecks of silt, and unbothered copepods dancing by like little commas of life. You can't see clearly, not yet, but you sense light. You respond to warmth. You detect pressure. And your most useful instinct, the one thing saving you, is your innate tendency to curl and pause when you sense danger, which, let's face it, is basically everything. You're translucent, almost invisible, and that's your first advantage. But invisibility isn't armor, and your first brush with danger comes quickly. A shadow overhead, a fish, maybe a juvenile wrasse, passes too close, drawn perhaps by movement or scent or pure accident. In response, you curl instinctively, becoming even less noticeable, holding yourself in a tense spiral that mimics plant debris. The fish glides by, uninterested, and you uncurl slowly, returning to your default state of drifting like sea lint.
By the end of your first day, you've already survived more than most of your siblings. The water has grown slightly cooler with the sun's fading presence, and the once golden light that made everything seem almost magical now dims to blue-gray murk. Night in the ocean is different from night on land. It is not quiet, not empty. It pulses. There are flashes from bioluminescent creatures, there are clicks and chirps and the low, distant thrum of something very large far below. The sea breathes deeper after dark, and you, without knowing why, feel the shift. You press yourself against a floating bit of seaweed and remain still, praying in a way you don't yet understand to remain ignored. As night deepens, your senses sharpen just enough to detect motion, not with eyes, not exactly, but with the fine, hair-like structures that line your body, reading the water like braille. Every pulse, every shift in pressure tells you something. Mostly it says, stay still, and this thing coming toward you is faster. You obey. Seahorses are not fast. They are not aggressive. They have no venom, no teeth, and no claws, What they do have, your tiny self included, is patience, camouflage, and the eternal hope that the big thing doesn't notice the little thing. You make it through the night somehow, and when the light filters in the next morning, soft and yellow-green like watercolor spilled in the ocean, you are still here. Your siblings, if they survived, have drifted elsewhere. You rarely see the same one twice. The ocean is too big, your movements too random. It is lonely, yes, but you don't yet know loneliness. You only know survival. You only know motion, stillness, light, shadow, and hunger. Because, oh yes, you're hungry. Your first meal is a copepod, maybe, or some microscopic larval shrimp, something you happen to be facing when your mouth opens and a gentle vacuum of water sucks the creature into your narrow, tubed snout. You don't bite, you don't chew, you inhale, and the food is gone. It happens almost by accident, and it will keep happening this way for much of your life. Hunting for a seahorse is 90% floating, 10% fast suck. You are essentially an aquatic straw with eyes. You eat another, and though your stomach is comically small, it's also very quick to empty. Seahorses have no stomach lining. Food passes through rapidly, so you eat, constantly, without ever really feeling full, which, if you think about it, is a pretty good metaphor for modern life. You start to grow, not dramatically, not all at once, but bit by bit, a few millimeters each week. Your body, once translucent, begins to take on color, pale beige, speckled with white, the perfect palette for blending into sun-bleached grasses. Your tail grows stronger, less decorative. One day, as you drift near a stalk of eelgrass, you reach out with that tail, not with thought, but with instinct, and grip. Just for a moment, but the hold is real, firm, grounding. You have, for the first time, a sense of place. It doesn't last long, the current pulls you free, but you remember. You try again the next time, and this time you hold on longer. This is how you survive now, not by fleeing, but by anchoring, by choosing your patch of seagrass and simply becoming part of it. It is a strange way to live, passive, reactive, delicate, but it is your way. And for now, it works.
The world you drift through is both beautiful and indifferent. You are barely aware of how small you are in the grand volume of ocean that surrounds you, but the feeling is there, subtle and constant, a kind of background hum of vulnerability that you carry with you, like the salt clinging to your skin. And yet, there's something oddly soothing about the sway of the current, the slow undulation of seagrass, the filtered rays of sunlight breaking through the water above in shimmering threads. It's like you've been born into an endless dream that rocks you gently, occasionally jostles you with a surprise current, but mostly just lulls you with the rhythm of its own unknowable time. You're nearly invisible now, and that is your greatest gift. In the early days, you don't so much hide as remain unseen by default. Your speckled body, barely longer than a grain of rice, refracts light like the water around it. If something is looking for you, it has to be lucky or very hungry. And even if it is, the odds are still oddly in your favor, because you're just one of hundreds released into the sea, and most predators don't have the patience to look for the twitch that you are. Still, invisibility isn't a promise, it's a strategy, and like all strategies in nature, it works until it doesn't. You learn, slowly and quietly, how to drift without drifting too far. The current is a constant companion and sometimes a nuisance. It pulls at you when you're trying to rest. It shoves you towards shadows that might contain mouths. You try, when you can, to drift at an angle, using your tiny fins to correct your position, nudging your body so that you float more or less where you want to go. It's not really swimming, not yet. It's more like guided falling. And every time you manage to hold your place, even for a moment, it feels like victory. Soon, you begin to notice the world around you more clearly. The seagrass no longer looks like a blur of green. It has texture now, fine details, small notches and ridges. Sometimes you see bubbles cling to its leaves. Sometimes you see other creatures, small crabs, transparent shrimp, crawling through its strands like hikers in a jungle. The grass sways with the rhythm of the tide, bending and straightening in a slow, hypnotic dance. And you, watching, begin to understand that this is not just your background, it's your home. Or at least, it will be if you can figure out how to hold on.
The world you drift through is both beautiful and indifferent. You are barely aware of how small you are in the grand volume of ocean that surrounds you, but the feeling is there, subtle and constant. A kind of background hum of vulnerability that you carry with you, like the salt clinging to your skin. And yet there's something oddly soothing about the sway of the current, the slow undulation of seagrass, the filtered rays of sunlight breaking through the water above in shimmering threads. It's like you've been born into an endless dream that rocks you gently, occasionally jostles you with a surprise current, but mostly just lulls you with the rhythm of its own unknowable time. You're nearly invisible now, and that is your greatest gift. In the early days, you don't so much hide as remain unseen by default. Your speckled body, barely longer than a grain of rice, refracts light like the water around it. If something is looking for you, it has to be lucky or very hungry. And even if it is, the odds are still oddly in your favor, because you're just one of hundreds released into the sea, and most predators don't have the patience to look for the twitch that you are. Still, invisibility isn't a promise. It's a strategy, and like all strategies in nature, it works until it doesn't. You learn, slowly and quietly, how to drift without drifting too far. The current is a constant companion, and sometimes a nuisance. It pulls at you when you're trying to rest. It shoves you towards shadows that might contain mouths. You try when you can to drift at an angle, using your tiny fins to correct your position, nudging your body so that you float more or less where you want to go. It's not really swimming, not yet. It's more like guided falling. And every time you manage to hold your place, even for a moment, it feels like victory. Soon, you begin to notice the world around you more clearly. The seagrass no longer looks like a blur of green. It has texture now, fine details, small notches and ridges. Sometimes you see bubbles cling to its leaves. Sometimes you see other creatures, small crabs, transparent shrimp, crawling through its strands like hikers in a jungle. The grass sways with the rhythm of the tide, bending and straightening in a slow, hypnotic dance. And you, watching, begin to understand that this is not just your background, it's your home. Or at least, it will be if you can figure out how to hold on.
The ocean is full of close calls. You get used to it. Your days settle into a kind of rhythm. Mornings are bright, sometimes almost too bright, especially when the surface is clear. Light scatters in bands and glints, making it hard to see, harder to be seen. You cling to grass, you feed. You shift locations every so often, never straying too far, but always aware of your surroundings. Afternoons bring slower currents, a chance to float and hunt without being hurled like a pebble. And evenings, those are your favorite. The light softens, the water stills, and everything becomes blue and calm and hushed. You rest more in the evenings, not fully asleep, not yet, but still content to remain anchored, watching the world exhale. One evening, something strange happens. You spot a long, silvery thread drifting down from above. It's not grass, it's not fish. It glints oddly, straight and fine, like a hair or a whisker that doesn't belong. You reach toward it, more curious than cautious. It brushes your snout. It smells like nothing you've encountered. You don't bite. You just look. And then, as silently as it appeared, the thread rises again, jerking upward, far too fast, as if pulled by a ghost. You never see it again. You'll remember that. The way the ocean sometimes introduces you to mysteries without explanations, threads that lead nowhere, shapes that vanish, sounds without sources. It keeps you humble.
It reminds you that this world, your world, is older and stranger than you'll ever comprehend. By now, your tail is strong enough to hold you through small surges. Your feeding strikes are faster, more accurate. You miss less often. You curl more tightly when you rest. You've learned how to become almost indistinguishable from your surroundings when you need to, and you often need to. Still, you remain small, fragile. Not because you are weak, but because life in the shallows demands delicacy. The brute creatures, the ones with claws and teeth and speed, they live differently. But you? You are a whisper in water, a creature of pause and patience. And it suits you.
Days turn into weeks. Not that you're counting, because time in the ocean doesn't click forward in numbers. It flows, like currents, like tides. One moment stretches softly into the next, and before you realize it, your fragile body is no longer translucent. You've taken on color now, muted tans and pale yellows, soft blues if you're lucky. Your skin isn't really skin at all, but a tough layer of interlocking plates, giving you that armor-like exterior that makes you less snack-like and more ornamental. Not quite predator-proof, but just enough to suggest to larger fish, maybe not worth the effort. You don't grow much in size. Seahorses are not exactly ocean giants, but you do grow in presence. You're no longer adrift all the time. Your tail is strong and curled with purpose, capable of gripping not just seagrass, but coral fingers, sponge tendrils, even bits of driftwood if they happen to float by slow enough. You're learning how to ride the environment without becoming its victim. By now, you've started recognizing patterns. Morning brings schools of silvery fish flashing in unison just above your head. You don't envy their speed. It's loud and chaotic and full of risk. You're not built for speed, and the sea knows it. Instead, you work on your patience. You wait. You observe. You learn how to keep your body still when the current brushes past, how to roll your eyes independently like little periscopes, each scanning a different patch of water for food or danger. One day, a shadow crosses you. Slow. Too slow to be a passing fish. You don't flinch, but your heart, yes, seahorses have hearts, beats a little faster. A pair of wide, curious eyes stares down at you. A snorkeler, maybe. Human. They hover, legs dangling, blowing little bubbles into the sea. You don't know what they are, not really, but you can sense they don't belong. They're a foreign pressure, a new rhythm, and you freeze in response. Your instinct doesn't scream danger. It whispers confusion, and that's enough for now. You cling tighter to your grass and wait. The snorkeler eventually floats off, bored perhaps. You remain invisible once again, a leaf among leaves. Food, while still abundant, is becoming more of a daily mission. You've honed your snout snapping technique to the point where it's less accident and more art. You hover, just so, wait until the copepod or mysid shrimp gets close enough, and then, slurp, it disappears, vacuumed into your slender mouth like it was never even there. You don't have teeth, but you do have suction. And in the world of the small and unsuspecting, that's all you really need.
But your diet, while repetitive, is not without its highlights. Sometimes you snag a slightly bigger prey, a larval crab perhaps. On rare days, you might even land something exotic, like a fish egg drifting in the current, glistening like a pearl. These are like ocean candy. You savor them, not with a sense of taste exactly, but with a vague biological satisfaction. Something inside you says, yes, that was a good catch. You begin to recognize your neighborhood. There's the bent coral finger shaped like a hook, the empty mollusk shell that's become a tiny fish's hideout, the long strand of seagrass that always attracts amphipods at midday. This is your territory, not because you defend it, seahorses aren't particularly territorial, but because you've memorized its comforts. You know where to hide, where to hunt, where to rest. That knowledge is your security blanket, even if no one else knows you carry it. And yet, despite this growing familiarity, danger remains a constant. You don't swim in fear, but you never let go of it entirely either. One minute you're peacefully anchored, and the next, a cuttlefish glides by, changing colors as it eyes your patch of seagrass. You freeze, flatten your body, match the swaying rhythm of the plants. If you're lucky, it won't bother. If you're luckier, you won't even be seen. And then there's the current. It doesn't always ask permission. Sometimes it lifts you from your post and tosses you down current, like a sock in a washing machine. You tumble through the water column, helpless for a moment, limbs outstretched, tails searching for something, anything to grab. You eventually manage to snag a coral stub or a clump of weed, your tail wrapping tight, muscles tense. You breathe, if that's the word for how seahorses take in water, and wait. Eventually, the surge passes. You shake slightly, then reposition, like a stubborn kite refusing to stay down. By now, you've seen the strange creatures of the reef come and go. A jellyfish, pulsing like a translucent heart. A banded sea snake, elegant and terrifying. A parrotfish grinding chloral in its powerful jaws, sending tiny clouds of white dust into the sea. Each one larger, stronger, faster than you. But none of them is you. None of them has mastered the art of invisibility, of stillness, of blending so perfectly with the backdrop that even the sea forgets you're there. It's a lonely superpower, but an effective one. And then, one day, something unexpected happens. You see another seahorse, not a distant blur or a passing flicker, but a full, proper adult, upright, swaying slightly, clinging to the same weed strand you were considering. They don't threaten you. They don't speak, obviously, but something unspoken passes between you. An awareness, a recognition. You circle each other slowly. Not aggressive, not romantic either, not yet, just curious. They move left, you follow. They pause, you hover beside them. There's a strange, unspoken comfort in the presence of someone who understands what it means to be this small, this slow, this invisible.
You don't mate, not yet, but the possibility is introduced, and that changes everything. From that day on, your priorities shift. Not all at once, but gradually. You still eat, still hide, still cling and freeze and wait. But now, part of you is listening for the soft signature ripple of another seahorse nearby. You want connection, not because of some grand emotional longing, but because evolution wants it for you. And let's be honest, it would be nice to not be the only weird vertical fish in the neighborhood. One evening, while anchored in your usual spot, you hear a new sound, a dull thump. Not loud, but out of place. You glance upward. A large shape looms, round with a hard outer shell, bobbing and sinking and rising again. A boat. Not a danger in itself, but a vessel of things that might be. Humans, lines, nets. You wait. They pass, trailing noise and bubbles and metallic shadows. Eventually, the quiet returns. But something is different now. The water smells faintly like gasoline. Your gills twitch. You don't understand what it is, but it doesn't belong. The reef seems quieter. The shrimp are less active. Even the light looks duller. You move to a new spot that night, farther from the passing path, just in case. Instinct whispers, not here anymore. And that's the thing about your life. It's not heroic, it's not full of battles or drama, but it's tuned. You read the ocean like a mood ring. You feel its sighs and shifts in your bones, or rather, your armored plates. And when something changes, you respond. You adjust. You drift again. But now, you drift with purpose.
You drift, but this time it's not the random wandering of a hatchling, nor the lazy meandering of a creature without aim. You drift with a kind of quiet determination, guided more by sensation than thought, as if the water itself is gently nudging you towards some place unseen but necessary. There's a rhythm you've begun to understand, not quite a pattern, more like a feeling in your bones when the tide shifts, or a ripple in the current that tells you it's time to let go of one strand of seagrass and curl your tail around the next. You leave the patch you've come to know so well, the coral shaped like a hook, the quiet cluster of shrimp that always appeared around midday, the strand of weed that always caught the light just right, and you let the current pull you away from the familiar. This isn't fleeing, it's molting, a kind of soft, underwater growing up that doesn't come with a ceremony or celebration, just a change in scenery and a whisper that it's time. The new place you arrive at isn't dramatically different. The ocean doesn't announce chapters, but the water feels cooler here, just a little, and the seafloor seems more uneven. The plants grow in sparser clumps, and patches of soft sand interrupt the green. It smells different too, more sediment, less algae. And here you meet others. Not many, and not close, but enough. A few seahorses hover in the distance, and though you don't exchange words, you exchange presence. You notice how one male bobs in place with a belly that looks a little swollen, not with food, but something else. Eggs, maybe. The kind he carries. Yes, in your kind, it's the male who holds the young, and that still feels oddly poetic, even though you don't dwell on it. And then there's another seahorse, closer to your size. You notice them not because they do something dramatic, but because they don't. They just exist beside you, anchored to a blade of weed that bends slightly under their weight, and for a moment, the two of you move in synchrony, swaying the same way, blinking out of sync. You let your tail uncurl, float closer, then re-anchor just a few strands away. They glance at you, not fearfully, just noting. You feel something stir, not a romance, not yet, but a recognition, a sense of possibility. This is the beginning of what might become courtship, though in your world, even courtship is a quiet dance, more motion than emotion.
Then comes a morning when something shifts. The other seahorse begins a strange movement, rising slightly into the water, twisting gently, turning in slow arcs. You mirror them, unsure whether it's invitation or coincidence. But when you rise, they rise again. When you dip, they follow. It's not a chase, it's a spiral. A slow, twining dance in 3 dimensions, guided by the pulse of the tide and the echo of instinct. You are beginning to court. Seahorse courtship is not rushed. It can last for hours or days, filled with gentle approaches, quiet withdrawals, synchronized drifting. You touch snouts once, very lightly. You pulse upward together, then return to your respective anchor points. The ocean moves around you. Life continues. But within your world, something has begun. Eventually, there is an exchange. If you are male, you open your brood pouch, and the female presses her abdomen close, depositing hundreds of minuscule eggs inside you. It's not flashy, not loud. It happens with a kind of reverence, a biological choreography that has no music and no applause. But it's profound in its way. You are now a vessel, a carrier of life. And the responsibility changes you. Carrying eggs isn't just about keeping them warm. You provide oxygen, regulate salinity, nourish them through a special lining in your pouch. It's like being pregnant, only flipped like so much else in your life. You anchor yourself more often now, rarely straying far. Your movements slow slightly. You eat more deliberately. You become, in every sense, more patient. The eggs develop quietly.
You don't talk to them, of course, but you feel their presence, a kind of soft pressure against your belly. As the days pass, your pouch begins to pulse slightly, and you feel tiny movements within. They are stirring, growing, waiting. And then, one night, during the dimness just before dawn, it happens. You feel a tightening in your abdomen, a contraction you didn't expect but immediately understand. You grip your anchor tightly, your body pulses again and again. Each pulse releases a tiny translucent life into the sea. 1, then 5, then 20. You don't count them, you just keep pushing, your body curling forward slightly with each release. A shimmering cloud of your offspring drifts into the water, each one smaller than a grain of rice, twitching erratically, utterly unprepared for the world they've entered. You don't guide them, you don't chase them, you don't even say goodbye. They scatter, like you once did, each alone from the moment they leave you. Most will not survive. That's the truth, and you know it without knowing it. But some will. And that is enough. You rest, finally, after it ends. You are exhausted, not just in body, but in spirit. You feel empty in the literal and figurative sense, but also calm, as if something in your design has been fulfilled, however briefly. The other seahorse returns the next day. You greet them, not with words, but with the ease of presence. You hover near again, but this time there is no dance, just the comfort of knowing you were not alone in that moment. You drift beside each other for a long while, and then the current nudges you apart. You don't resist. You've done what you were made to do. And now, the sea calls you onward again.
You drift again, but this time it feels different. You're no longer a newcomer trying to survive the randomness of ocean life. You're not just reacting, you're reflecting. The water isn't just something around you now, it's something inside you, something you've come to read like mood or memory. It changes temperature, taste, texture. Sometimes it pulses with distant motion, as if something immense is happening far away. Sometimes it lies still, holding its breath. The current that carries you now is slow and steady, like a moving sidewalk with no clear destination. You don't fight it. There's no need. Your tail curls instinctively whenever something familiar passes by. A curling stalk of eelgrass, a soft coral limb, the shadowy remains of a sunken coconut husk. But you don't stop for long. There's something in you that seeks new edges, new places to pause, even if you're not sure why. Maybe it's that low biological hum that whispers, move, explore, live while the sea lets you. As you float along, you pass through a field of dancing jellyfish, tiny ones, no bigger than your head, pulsing in rhythmic transparency. They glow slightly, phosphorescent halos twinkling with the light from above. You avoid them, not because you're afraid, but because you know better than to brush against anything that glows without blinking. Most of them are harmless, but you've seen what happens to careless swimmers. A gentle sting can become a lingering ache, and you've learned to respect the small and strange. Beyond the jellyfish comes a region that feels shallower, the light here dappled, flickering like reflections in a mirrored pool. You anchor yourself to a clump of seagrass and take in the view. Small damfish dart between stems, their tails twitching nervously. Crabs move sideways along the sand, always looking busy. A turtle passes overhead, its massive form casting a slow shadow that takes forever to cross your field of vision. You don't blink, you just watch. You're alone again, but the aloneness doesn't feel heavy. It feels earned. It feels like space. Your body is changing again, not drastically, but in subtle ways that you only notice when you pause for long enough. Your tail is thicker now, stronger.
Your dorsal fin flicks with a little more force, and your eyes, those odd, swiveling eyes, seem quicker to focus, more tuned to detail. You catch the movement of a passing shrimp a fraction of a second faster. You anchor more securely during surges. You are becoming, in the quietest way possible, good at this life. And with experience comes boredom, now and then. Not every moment in the sea is thrilling. Most are not. Most are the underwater equivalent of watching paint dry, except the paint is algae, and it's growing on a rock you've stared at for an hour because the current hasn't changed direction yet. You amuse yourself by tracking a tiny air bubble as it rises through a forest of seaweed. You follow the path of a grain of sand tumbling in slow circles along the floor. You spend an entire morning observing a nudibranch slowly, excruciatingly slowly, crawl from one side of a sponge to the other, leaving a nearly invisible slime trail behind it. You drift again, but this time it feels different. You're no longer a newcomer trying to survive the randomness of ocean life. You're not just reacting. You're reflecting. The water isn't just something around you now. It's something inside you. Something you've come to read like mood or memory. It changes temperature, taste, texture. Sometimes it pulses with distant motion, as if something immense is happening far away. Sometimes it lies still, holding its breath. The current that carries you now is slow and steady, like a moving sidewalk with no clear destination. You don't fight it. There's no need. Your tail curls instinctively whenever something familiar passes by. A curling stalk of eelgrass, a soft coral limb, the shadowy remains of a sunken coconut husk. But you don't stop for long. There's something in you that seeks new edges, new places to pause, even if you're not sure why. Maybe it's that low biological hum that whispers, move, explore, live while the sea lets you. As you float along, you pass through a field of dancing jellyfish, tiny ones, no bigger than your head, pulsing in rhythmic transparency. They glow slightly, phosphorescent halos twinkling with the light from above. You avoid them, not because you're afraid, but because you know better than to brush against anything that glows without blinking. Most of them are harmless, but you've seen what happens to careless swimmers. A gentle sting can become a lingering ache, and you've learned to respect the small and strange. Beyond the jellyfish comes a region that feels shallower, the light here dappled, flickering like reflections in a mirrored pool. You anchor yourself to a clump of seagrass and take in the view. Small damfish dart between stems, their tails twitching nervously. Crabs move sideways along the sand, always looking busy. A turtle passes overhead, its massive form casting a slow shadow that takes forever to cross your field of vision. You don't blink, you just watch. You're alone again, but the aloneness doesn't feel heavy. It feels earned. It feels like space. Your body is changing again, not drastically, but in subtle ways that you only notice when you pause for long enough. Your tail is thicker now, stronger. Your dorsal fin flicks with a little more force. And your eyes, those odd, swiveling eyes, seem quicker to focus, more tuned to detail. You catch the movement of a passing shrimp a fraction of a second faster. You anchor more securely during surges. You are becoming, in the quietest way possible, good at this life. And with experience comes boredom, now and then. Not every moment in the sea is thrilling. Most are not. Most are the underwater equivalent of watching paint dry, except the paint is algae, and it's growing on a rock you've stared at for an hour because the current hasn't changed direction yet. You amuse yourself by tracking a tiny air bubble as it rises through a forest of seaweed. You follow the path of a grain of sand tumbling in slow circles along the floor. You spend an entire morning observing a nudibranch slowly, excruciatingly slowly, crawl from one side of a sponge to the other, leaving a nearly invisible slime trail behind it.
The sea has moods, and by now, you've come to understand them. Some mornings it hums with a kind of low cheerfulness, gentle waves, soft light, and an easy current that nudges you from place to place as though it wants you to enjoy the scenery. Other days, the ocean sulks. The currents twist unpredictably, the sand kicks up from the bottom, and everything seems just slightly off, like a room that's been rearranged without warning. But you no longer panic at the mood swings. You've lived enough tides to know they pass. Like everything else in the sea, nothing stays still. Not the water, not the light, not even you. You've grown, though it's hard to notice in yourself. Your snout has lengthened a bit, your body has thickened just enough that small shrimp no longer look like daunting prey, but like familiar snacks. You don't see your reflection, not really, but you sometimes notice the way smaller seahorses glance at you from the side. Not out of fear, but the way children might look at someone who's figured out how to survive. That's who you are now. Not a hatchling, not a parent, at least not anymore, but a fixture. A creature who's been here for a while and learned the art of quiet endurance. One day, you follow a current without much thought, letting it spin you lazily in a slow circle as it loops around a sunken root system. The roots are thick and crusted with barnacles. Sponges dot their surface like fleshy mushrooms. You anchor yourself to one with a slight bend and just watch the world drift past. There's something meditative about it, like watching the same scene play out with different characters every time. A goby darts by. A pair of pipefish slither silently across the sand. A sea slug, in no particular rush, oozes its way up a stalk of soft coral, leaving a path you can barely see. There's no need to move. Not yet. But soon, you feel something odd. Not a threat, not a predator, just vibration. A low, rhythmic pulse in the water that you can't quite identify. You swivel your eyes independently, scanning the water. Nothing. You wait. The pulse comes again, deeper now, like a drumbeat echoing through a cavern. Then again. You know what this is. Humans. You've never seen one up close, not really, but the sea remembers. It whispers stories into your bones. The way their boats throb against the surface, the way their shadows loom, the way their discarded objects float for weeks, months, years without sinking. They don't belong here, but they come anyway. Sometimes they bring destruction, sometimes curiosity. Sometimes they leave behind only bubbles and confusion. This time, they leave something more. It's not traumatic, no giant net or crashing anchor, just a small, clinking box that tumbles through the water and lands in the sand with a muted puff. You watch it from your perch. It doesn't move, it doesn't hum, it just sits there, shiny, too square to be natural. One side of it flashes when the sun hits it. The other is covered with something soft and green, like moss that grew too fast. You inch closer over the course of the day, not because you're curious, but because, well, yes, you are. Carefully, slowly, you approach, anchoring your tail to a nearby stick before stretching forward to inspect it. No scent, no movement, just unnatural stillness. You back away. Within a few days, the box is part of the landscape. Small fish dart around it, algae begins to grow on its corners. A crab claims the inside as shelter. Even in this world, the strange becomes familiar. You drift past it now and then without giving it much thought. You are, after all, a creature of the present. The past sits behind you like a cloud of silt, too dispersed to catch. You spend your days feeding, which is not glamorous, but essential. Brine shrimp, copepods, amphipods. You vacuum them into your snout one at a time, each with a quick flick of your neck. You don't chew, you don't savor. It's more like a reflex, a mechanical click, click, click of life maintenance. But sometimes, in the quiet afternoons, when the current is soft
and the sun slants through the surface in gold ribbons, it almost feels like pleasure. And yes, there is danger. There always is. A sudden shadow, a hungry grouper, a moray eel lurking in a hole that didn't smell like eel yesterday. But you've gotten good at reading the warning signs. You don't overreact. You don't dart or dash. You freeze. You let your colors dull. You sway exactly as the seagrass sways. And when the predator leaves, disappointed or simply uninterested, you resume as if nothing ever happened. One day, a storm arrives. You don't know it at first. You only notice the current shifting. Then the temperature drops, just slightly. Then the light disappears, not because of nightfall, but because the sky above has turned dark. You feel it long before the waves crash. The storm hits hard. The sea goes from humming to howling in hours. You anchor yourself tightly to a thick stalk of seaweed and tuck your head down. Sand churns, bits of shell and stone zip past like bullets. The water becomes chaotic, almost angry. It pushes you sideways, upside down. You hold fast, your tail wrapped in a death grip, muscles aching from the strain. The storm lasts a day, maybe two. You don't count. Time in that chaos becomes meaningless. All you know is holding on. And then, stillness. The sea doesn't stop all at once. It quiets gradually, like a tantrum ending in exhausted sniffles. The current slows, the sand settles, the light returns. You emerge from your hiding place slowly, your body trembling not from fear but from the sheer force of having survived. Around you, everything looks changed, flattened, rearranged. The box is gone. The coral has broken in places. A once lush field of seaweed now lies in tangled knots on the seafloor. But you're alive. And that is, in this moment, enough. You spend the next days recovering. You don't travel far. You feed quietly. You anchor more often. You move less. The world feels unfamiliar again, but not in a threatening way. More like a room that's been cleaned by someone else. Tidier, but confusing. You rebuild your routines. You find a new feeding spot. You locate a new coral branch to call your own. And slowly, your muscles stop aching. Your rhythm returns. And through it all, the sea continues. It doesn't mourn the storm. It doesn't celebrate the calm. It simply flows with or without you. You, too, begin to flow again.
The days return to their drifting pace, one indistinguishable from the next, and that, somehow, is a comfort. You've never needed a calendar. The sea tells time through rhythm, through pattern, through the way the light slices the water a little differently each week, or how the seagrass bends in slow arcs with the pull of the moon. There are no numbers here, just sensations, and you've come to trust them more than any tick of a clock. After the storm, your world feels wider. Not because you've traveled, but because so much of the familiar has shifted. The same coral heads now hold different neighbors. The seafloor wears a new blanket of debris, tiny shells and strands of sponge scattered like a forgotten mosaic. Even the currents hum in new keys. You explore with caution, not because you fear what you'll find, but because the sea, even when it gives, always demands awareness. You find a hollow in the base of a broken coral formation, a perfect little nook shaped almost like a cradle. It curves just enough for your body to fit along the inner wall, and the base is padded with soft algae, mossy and springy under your weight. You begin returning there each evening after long hours of drifting, eating, observing. It becomes your ritual, your tiny fortress of solitude. And in those moments of stillness, you start noticing the tiny things again. The click of a crab claw 2 feet away, the way microbubbles get caught in your tail ridges, the soundless flutter of a nudibrank's gills as it inches along the seaweed. Life, when slowed to this degree, reveals its own sort of detail. And here, in this slower current, you realize something. You are no longer growing rapidly, no longer shedding skin or sprouting new ridges. You are, for the first time, simply being. This, in the strange underwater world of the seahorse, is the longest chapter. Not the birth, not the mating, not even the old age to come. But this, the middle, the in-between, where every day is both the same and slightly new, where survival no longer feels like struggle but like habit, where you belong to the sea not as a guest, not as a child, but as a resident. You watch the landscape like a watchman. You notice the change in the jellyfish drift. There are fewer now. You spot the beginning of a coral bloom, tiny polyps extending their feathery mouths to catch plankton as the tides change. You observe a family of blennies setting up residence in the ruins of an old conch shell, the father darting back and forth, ever vigilant, while the juveniles practice flaring their tiny fins in mock displays of intimidation. And sometimes you get visitors. Not friends, exactly, not in the way mammals might think of companionship, but presences, familiar shapes. A stingray that glides low across the sand every few days, scattering shrimp in its wake. A particularly loud parrotfish who grinds coral noisily just above your usual feeding spot. Even the occasional returning seahorse, one you recognize, vaguely, by the shape of their crown or the pattern of dark bands on their side. You nod at each other in that seahorse way, silent, still, with a shared glance. You don't need to speak. The sea handles introductions and farewells alike.
One afternoon, you drift higher than usual, curiosity pulling you closer to the sunlit shallows. It's warmer there, brighter, almost blinding after so long in the softer depths. The surface light dances in frantic mosaics, and the water tastes fresher, more stirred. Here, the grasses are shorter, the corals more colorful. There are creatures you don't often see below. Butterfly fish, bright and twitchy. Juvenile wrasses like streaks of electric color. A crab waves one absurdly large claw at you from the edge of a rock before scuttling backward into its burrow. You find a floating mass of seaweed and anchor yourself near its center. It rocks gently in the swell like a hammock. Around you, juvenile fish seek the same refuge. Some hide from predators, others from each other. One bold damselfish swims too close and bumps your side. Whether by accident or on purpose, you're not sure. You consider flicking your tail, but instead you just sway, letting the rhythm of the seaweed rock you back into stillness. You spend the day there, simply floating. And while you float, you think. Not in words, not like humans do, but an instinct, an echo. You feel the waters pulled on your ridges. You feel the memory of storms and the weight of the sand. You feel the fading ache of that first dance, the one that passed through you like a dream and left behind something deeper than longing. Later, as the light softens, you drift down again, back into your depth, back into the body-warmed cradle of your coral hollow. And as you wrap your tail around the algae and let your head lean forward just slightly, you feel something you can't quite name. It's not happiness. That's too simple. It's not sadness either. You are not lonely. It's more like completion. You are, in this exact moment, everything you're supposed to be. Not preparing for something, not recovering from something. Just here. And it feels enough. You sleep. Yes, seahorses sleep too. Not like surface creatures with REM cycles and dreams of flying, but with slow, drifting pauses. You dim. Your body stiffens slightly. Your gills flutter more gently. Your eyes stop swiveling. You become, for a while, a piece of the scenery, a decorative living thread in the underwater tapestry. You rest for minutes, for hours, for however long the sea allows. And when you stir again, the water is the same, but also new. A new current, a new drift of plankton, a new day. And you, silent, slow,
dignified in your absurd little armor, begin again. No one celebrates it. No fanfare, no sunrise trumpet, just the click of your snout and the silent hum of your dorsal fin as you rise. As always, gently, without rush, you continue.
You begin the day like you always do, not because you're aware it's a new day, but because the water tells you so. The light filters differently now, tinged with a slight rose, as if the sea itself is blushing at some secret joke told far above the surface. The currents roll from a fresh angle, nudging you gently out of your hollow. You stretch, not in the way creatures with limbs stretch, but in the gentle flex of your fin, the long, slow curl of your tail unwinding from its anchor, and the soft, steady pulse of your dorsal fin beginning its daily rhythm. And you drift. It's strange how often you find yourself in motion without knowing why. You don't choose a direction. The sea offers one. You follow. That's how it works. Choice is a luxury for creatures with feet, fire, and calendars. For you, living is a collaboration between instinct and tide. You let the current carry you toward a part of the reef you haven't visited in weeks, not because you were avoiding it, but because there hadn't been a need. Everything you required, food, shelter, space, was already within reach, but today the sea is curious on your behalf, pulling you toward an old coral spine that rises like a stone monument from the seafloor. It's more battered than you remember. Some of the edges are broken, jagged. Algae clings to the ridges like tangled hair, and tiny fish flicker in and out of the holes like anxious thoughts. You hover in front of one crevice and watch a cleaner shrimp work its way along a grouper's gills. The grouper, normally a predator, even to creatures your size, sits perfectly still, mouth open, trusting the little shrimp to do its meticulous dance. It's a rare truce, one that ends the moment the cleaning's done. And, just as expected, it does. The grouper twitches, closes his jaws with a snap, and disappears with a flick of its tail. The shrimp dances backward, unbothered, and retreats into its tiny den. The drama of the reef is small and constant, never theatrical, never loud, just steady, like a conversation whispered between creatures who don't need words. You drift upward, circling the coral spine slowly. A patch of soft coral pulses beside you, its fronds expanding and contracting with the rhythm of the water like underwater lungs. You let your tail brush against one of the thicker stalks. It feels rubbery, but alive. There's a pleasure in it, simple, tactile. You don't often think of touch, but moments like these remind you that even here, contact means something. Further along, you spot a peculiar object. Not natural, not entirely foreign either. It's wedged between two coral outcrops, barely visible beneath a film of algae. You approach. It's a fragment of something. Plastic, maybe. Round and flat, about the size of a leaf, with strange markings along the edge. A bottle cap. Lost by a human somewhere who probably never imagined it would travel hundreds of miles to settle in your neighborhood. You don't know what it is, not truly, but you know it doesn't belong. Still, like everything else, it becomes part of the scenery. You watch a small wrasse investigate the cap. It bumps it once, twice, then zips away. You don't interfere. You just float, a passive observer to everything and nothing at once. After a while, you notice the cap has attracted company. A pair of curious young seahorses, barely bigger than twigs, hover nearby. Their snouts twitch. Their movements are erratic, clumsy like someone learning to walk on stilts. You recognize that stage. You lived it too, flipping over yourself in currents, anchoring to things you couldn't hold, staring too long at a passing jellyfish until you got stung. One of the youngsters bumps into your side, startled to discover you there. You swivel an eye to look at them. They freeze. You remain still. The tension holds for a beat. And then they drift off. Not in fear, not in challenge, but just in that aimless beginner's motion that defines so much of young life in the sea. You remain, and you think about time. Not in a human sense, not measured by birthdays or hours or years, but in moments like this, when you see what you once were and realize you're no longer becoming, but being. That stage, the awkward fumble of survival, is behind you now. You are no longer a fragile flicker trying not to be eaten. You are solid, present, unremarkable in the most comforting way. And yes, you still eat. Still snap up plankton with that automatic vacuum snapping motion of your snout. Still hover in your feeding zones. Still anchor when you sleep. But something is different now. The sea doesn't feel bigger anymore. It feels familiar. Not small, never that, but navigable, understandable. You know its moods, its warning signs. You can tell when a predator is near just by the way the sand rises. You can predict the shift in current before it even turns. And you've started to realize something else, something important, that your place in this sea is not just to survive it, but to live in it. Living for a seahorse means drifting and staying still. It means solitude mostly, but not loneliness. It means being part of a system so vast and detailed that your presence, though tiny, is essential. You feed others. You keep the balance. You occupy space gently but meaningfully. And maybe, if you're lucky, someone will remember you. Not by name, you don't have one. Not by sound, you don't speak. But by the space you shaped. The coral branch you rested on for weeks. The small patch of seagrass that bent around you like a cradle. The tiny lives that observed you once and continued because they saw you continue. This is your legacy. Not carved into stone, but written in water.
You return to the quiet side of the reef, the one sheltered from the strongest tides, where the seagrass forms gentle swaying forests, and the silt settles slowly, never in a hurry. This is your haven now, not because it offers anything remarkable, but because it offers consistency. Here you know how the light will move. You know where the food drifts, how the shadows fall, and which coral spines are safest to coil your tail around when you need to rest without thinking. The days have started folding into one another, not in a dull way, but in the way a gentle lullaby plays over and over again, never new, never tiring. The rhythm of your life has deepened. You feed when the plankton passes, you pause when the water stills. You rise and fall like a leaf on the breath of the sea. You have become, in every sense, part of this rhythm. And as you do, you begin to notice even subtler patterns. The seagrass near your resting place has thinned slightly, not dramatically, but enough that you can see more of the sand below than you did a few weeks ago. Something is feeding there. Perhaps a school of rabbitfish, maybe a particularly bold sea turtle carving gentle furrows with its mouth. You don't mind. These changes are small, and the sea has taught you not to resist small changes. Sometimes you catch your reflection in a bubble or in the curved surface of a snail's shell. Your body has grown a little more textured. Those ridges that once looked so soft and pale are now defined like the seams of a delicate sculpture. Your crown is more pronounced, not regal, just finished. You didn't notice the change as it happened. You simply became more of yourself, like sand shaped into a smoother pebble by the tides of time. It's strange to imagine that others might not even notice you. A passing diver would likely miss your figure entirely, mistaking you for a piece of weed or a curling twig. That invisibility once frightened you, but now it brings a kind of peace. You have no need to be seen. You are where you belong, and the sea knows you're here. That's enough. One day, the current carries something unexpected. A piece of leaf, but not seaweed. Real leaf, surface leaf. Browned at the edges, slightly curled, waterlogged and bobbing in the slow drift. It must have blown in from some distant island or fallen from a tree that overhangs a river miles away. You approach it, curious. It spins gently as it sinks, catching the light in a way no seaborne thing does. It smells different. You can't explain how, but it carries a trace of air, something faint and sweet and distant. You nudge it with your snout, and it spins again. Nothing more happens. The moment passes, the leaf continues its descent, and you continue your slow patrol through the seagrass. You think about the land, not with longing, you've never known it, but you wonder what it must be like to live somewhere where everything stops when you sleep, where the ground stays still, where light comes and goes in straight lines, and where air presses against you with invisible fingers. The sea never stops, not really. Even when it calms, it's still moving, breathing, humming beneath the surface.
That endless motion suits you. You remember once, long ago, though time has no clear name here, a moment when a shadow passed overhead, a large one. It blocked out the sun for a blink, and when it moved on, the water churned slightly with its passing. It could have been a ray, or a large fish, or something bigger. You didn't panic. You simply froze like the reef does when danger drifts near. That's how you survive, not by fighting or fleeing, but by becoming part of the background. That's the secret, isn't it? The sea doesn't favor the fastest or the fiercest. It favors the ones who can blend, who can slow down until they're not a target, until they're not even noticed. You've gotten very good at that. A pipefish cruises past you now, long and slender, a cousin of yours in some distant evolutionary way. You watch it glide, barely moving. It doesn't look at you. You don't look directly at it, but you acknowledge each other in that way only creatures of stillness can. A small tilt, a slower breath, a brief overlap of presence, then gone. You spend time observing a patch of anemones. They're soft, fleshy, swaying in a slow rhythm that has nothing to do with the current and everything to do with their own internal clock. A clownfish pair patrols the edges, fiercely territorial despite their size. You don't get too close. You've learned that even the smallest things in the sea have boundaries, and they defend them without apology. Eventually, you find a new anchor point, a curling blade of seagrass bent into an elegant arc. It feels right. It holds. You wrap your tail, pause, and let your eyes swivel lazily. There's no need to move unless something asks you to. You watch. You breathe. You are still. And in that stillness, something surprising happens. Another seahorse. You don't know if it's the same one from before. Maybe. Their patterns are familiar, a soft ripple of white across a pale brown body, slightly smaller than you, but not by much. They pause just a few lengths away, watching you. You don't move, neither do they. Time stretches, and then slowly, cautiously, they drift closer, not directly toward you, but beside, parallel. You both hover in the space between touch and distance, close enough to share a current, far enough not to crowd. And you stay like that for a long time, minutes, maybe more, just existing in tandem. You don't mate.
That's not what this is. It's something quieter. A recognition. A reminder that in a world built on solitude and silence, sometimes just being near another is enough. Eventually, they drift away. Not abruptly, just with the tide. You don't follow, but a part of you lingers in the space they left behind, like warmth in water after a hand is removed. You sleep that night with a new kind of calm, curled around your seagrass ark, letting the current whisper stories you'll never remember, but always feel. And in the morning, when the light returns, you rise once more, not because anything urgent calls you, but because you're still here. And that's reason enough.
You're older now, not ancient. There are sea creatures who outlive storms, who carry decades in the grooves of their shells. But you, a seahorse, in your gentle span of time, have reached the stage where each motion feels like something practiced, where the rhythm of the reef world has become deeper, wider, even if your territory hasn't grown at all. There's a small patch of reef nearby, one you once avoided because it seemed too exposed, too much light, not enough coverage. But lately, you've taken to hovering near it in the mornings. The water's clear here, the sand beneath white and unbroken, and tiny shrimp flicker in and out of the coral's lacework like nervous thoughts that never quite settle. You watch them work, scraping, shifting, sifting. They are tireless, never stopping, as if the act of movement is what holds them together. You, however, are content to pause. Hovering just above the sand, you become a shadow. Not ominous, not noticed, just an extra shade layered over light. The younger fish ignore you. Even the curious ones eventually drift off when they realize you pose no threat and offer no novelty, and that's exactly how you like it. You watch as a school of silversides rushes past, a living ribbon of metal flashing in the sun. For a moment, you're caught in the swirl of their passage, tugged slightly by the momentum of their speed, but you're not worried. The moment they're gone, the sea returns to its slower pulse, and so do you. This reef has changed over time. You've watched it happen. Coral bleaching in streaks, new growth in odd places, the strange detritus that drifts in from storms. Once, you spotted a pair of goggles wedged into a crevice, half buried in algae, the strap dangling like seaweed. Another time, an entire plastic sandal floated into your space and spun lazily for 3 days before vanishing again, likely swept into another corner of the reef where some crab may now be using it as an apartment. You've learned not to be surprised by anything the ocean offers. A coconut husk, a glove, a child's toy, bright blue, so jarringly out of place it made you stare for hours. But they're all just things, temporary, meaningful only to those who lost them. You anchor yourself to a branching coral and let your body rest. Your eyes still swivel, each one moving independently, scanning the world with that lazy vigilance you've developed over time. You're not looking for danger, not really, just watching, the way the sea always watches you. You catch sight of another seahorse once again, perhaps the same one, perhaps not. This time, they're dancing, not wildly, not for attention, but that slow, deliberate movement that says, "I'm here, and I see you." They drift past without pause, not stopping to engage, and yet you feel their presence lingering, like the echo of a wave long after it breaks. Later, you venture into a denser patch of algae, where the water darkens and sound feels softer. Here, crabs clatter under rocks, and the occasional moray eel peers out with a frown that looks permanent. You're careful here. This space doesn't belong to you, and you know better than to linger too long in someone else's shadow. Still, you pass through it with purpose, not fear. You've learned how to move in silence,
Your body offers no threat, no splash, no ripple of challenge. You are the idea of stillness, gliding by like a dream not fully remembered. When you emerge again into the brighter waters, you blink, if you could blink, and let the light settle on your skin. The colors of the reef are richer today, or perhaps your vision is simply more attuned to notice them. The reds are deeper, the purples more velvet than violet, the oranges glow like embers. This isn't metaphor, it's fact. The sea shifts its palette constantly, and you, like the coral and the fish and the sand, are painted anew every day. Your thoughts, if they could be called that, are never linear. You don't remember in the way humans do. No neat narrative, no calendar of events, but impressions linger. You remember the feeling of a current too strong, the pressure of hiding beneath a ledge, the coolness of the water before a storm, the weightless hush that follows heavy rain when it touches the surface and whispers its way down to you. There was one time, perhaps weeks ago, perhaps seasons, when the sea grew too warm. The plankton grew dense and bitter, and you couldn't feed without choking on the murk. You starved for a day or two, not to the point of death, but enough to feel it, a tightness in your body, a fog in your gaze. It passed. The tide shifted. The food returned. But you remembered, not as trauma, just as another note in the music of your life. You don't have a name. You never needed one. But if you did, it might be something like drift, or still, or pause. Your identity is not a sound, but a movement, a shape, a part of a larger picture too vast to understand, but simple enough to live in. You find yourself back at your favorite curve of seagrass, the same one you wrapped around days ago, maybe weeks, maybe a lifetime. It's still here, still green, still holding you, without asking for anything in return. You grip it loosely and let your fins idle. The world moves around you, but you remain exactly where you are. You notice a new growth on the coral nearby, a cluster of polyps, tiny and translucent, glowing faintly in the filtered light. They pulse as they feed, unaware of you, unafraid, simply being. And maybe that's the point. Not to conquer, not to claim, but to be. Quietly, gently, steadily. That's what the sea teaches you every day. And so, once again, you breathe. Not with lungs, not with effort, but through the constant motion of the water flowing over your gills. Each breath is a gift that doesn't need to be opened. It simply happens, and that is enough. You close your eyes, or rather, you stop swiveling them. You let go of the watching, the scanning, the observing. You don't need to look for anything. Everything is here. Everything is now. And so are you.
You drift into a quieter phase of your life, though calling it quieter might be misleading. After all, everything about your existence has always been quiet. The soundscape around you remains soft, filtered by layers of water and distance. If something loud happens, it is still muffled, like thunder heard from beneath a blanket. But the quietness you now settle into is not just of sound. It's a quietness of urgency, of energy, of needing to prove or explore or find. You've already found what matters. Or rather, it has found you. The current still rolls gently past, a constant whisper in your ear. You can feel it along the sensitive ridges of your face and across your tail as it remains coiled around the same faithful stalk of seagrass. The water is warmer these days, not hot, not dangerous, but more embracing, as though the sea is wrapping you in a shawl spun from light and time. The warmth makes you slower, but you don't mind. Slowness feels like safety now. It feels like home. You begin to notice how the world has grown more crowded, not with bodies, but with patterns. The way the plankton moves has changed slightly. Their paths seem to ripple in arcs instead of waves. You watch for long minutes, maybe hours, as a school of baby anchovies shimmers into formation above you. They dart in perfect unison, shifting directions like a single thought made of many parts. You wonder how they do that, communicate without words, coordinate without planning. Then you remember, you do it too, with other seahorses, with the water itself, not through sound or signal, but through feeling. You breathe in the way you always have, without effort. The sea gives you what you need, and you take only what's required, no more, no less. There is no greed in your world, no waste, only a kind of balance that the surface creatures seem to have long forgotten. You see a jellyfish today, a large one, its dome pulsing with lazy elegance, its tendrils dragging behind it like threads of glass. You watch from a safe distance. You've learned long ago not to get too close. Jellyfish don't mean harm, but they carry it all the same. Beautiful, untouchable, a floating chandelier in the cathedral of the reef. It moves with such slow grace that you feel a strange kinship, not because you are alike, but because you've both given yourselves to the water's will.
That same day, you come across something stranger still. A cluster of bubbles rising from the sand in a straight line. Not natural. No fish makes bubbles like that. It smells faintly of oil and something metallic, human. You don't understand what it is, not really, just that it doesn't belong. You drift back to your grasses, comforted by the known. At night, the reef glows, not like it does during the day when the sun pierces down in shafts of gold, but in pulses, in flashes. Bioluminescent algae drift in and out of your view like tiny stars lost in liquid sky. You hover still, and some of them cling to your body for a while before floating on. For a moment, you look like a constellation. Then you don't. That's fine. Everything fades. Everything passes. You've stopped needing things to last. One morning, you sense a shift in the current, not just in speed, but in mood, if the sea can be said to have moods. There's a pressure to it, a thickness, as though something large is coming. You stay closer to the base of the reef, winding your tail tighter than usual. Nothing happens for hours, but by the time the sun begins to angle differently through the water, you feel it, a tremor, deep and distant, not sound, vibration. A boat, maybe. You wait. Eventually, shapes appear above you, massive, foreign, casting strange shadows through the surface. Divers. Their limbs churn the water in slow arcs. They carry metal and bubbles. Their eyes are hidden behind masks. You watch from your hiding place. One of them points downward and a hand reaches out to touch the coral. You brace, instinctively. But they don't break anything this time. They simply float, observing. One of them shines a light into a crevice and nods. Then, as quietly as they arrived, they rise and vanish, trailing air behind them like threads. You exhale slowly, if such a thing is possible. The reef exhales with you, and everything begins again. That night, a crab wanders too close to your perch. It's not hunting you, but its claws twitch with curiosity. You uncoil, drift a few inches to the left, and anchor again. The crab moves on. Crisis averted. You don't even think about it anymore. Danger is just part of the pattern. It visits, it passes, and you remain. In this rhythm, you begin to mark your own passage through time, not by seasons or moons, but by the return of moments. The same current that brushes you in the early morning, the same plankton bloom that arrives with the warmer tides, the same strange clicking noise, some shrimp or fish that marks dusk like a gentle alarm clock. You don't need to know why. You only need to know that it happens, and it comforts you.
You see fewer other seahorses now. That doesn't mean they're gone, just that your worlds no longer overlap so often.
And that's okay. You're not lonely. You're not even alone. The reef is still full, still humming, still alive in the small ways that matter. Once you spot a tiny juvenile seahorse, no longer than a pine needle, struggling to anchor itself to a frond. It flails, tumbles, rights itself. You watch, not out of judgment, just recognition. That was you once, tiny, uncertain, at the mercy of every tug and shift. The baby finally finds a grip and clings tight, its entire body quivering from the effort. You turn away, not out of disinterest, but respect. It's their reef now too. Your days feel longer now, but only because you feel them more deeply. There is no boredom here, only repetition. And repetition is not dull, it is sacred. In repetition, you find meaning. In the return of the tide, the familiar pattern of coral light, the small acts of eating and drifting and watching, you are reminded that being alive doesn't always mean moving forward. Sometimes it means staying still and noticing what changes around you. There's a deep crack in a rock nearby, one that you've never explored. It used to frighten you, not because it was dangerous, though it might be, but because it was unknown. But now you consider it, not as a place to hide, but a place to visit. Just once. You approach slowly, spiraling gently through the water, your eyes swiveling side to side. You don't go in, you just look. It's darker inside, but not silent. You hear the tick-tick of something within, not hostile, just alive. You turn back. That was enough. A glance into the unknown and the comfort of return. You sleep that night wrapped tightly around your usual perch, your body faintly glowing with the residue of plankton light. The reef breathes beside you, and you with it.
The sea has moods, you've decided. It doesn't have days or feelings the way land creatures understand them, but it does have pulses, shifts in color, temperature, sound, and scent. Some mornings feel stretched and languid, like a slow exhale from the belly of the world. Other times, the water brims with invisible tension, buzzing faintly, like something just out of sight is preparing to emerge. Today feels like the former. Everything is slow, the current glides like silk, and even the fish seem to trail sleep behind them as they swim. You don't resist. You let yourself be part of the drowsy rhythm. You drift upwards slightly, not for food, not even out of curiosity, but just because it feels good. There's something almost warm near the surface, where the sunlight filters in more thickly, painting faint golden waves across your spine. You pause mid-water, tail loosely curled, dorsal fin ticking back and forth like a metronome set to a lullaby. Around you, the particles of plankton swirl lazily, barely moving unless you breathe too hard or twist too quickly. You don't. You remain still. A wrasse passes you by, its long body marked with blue and green stripes, iridescent and hypnotic. It glances at you, perhaps, or perhaps not. You don't know how much a fish like that sees you. You're designed to be overlooked, your ridged body mimicking the stems of grasses and corals. Still, you imagine that for a second, it saw you. And you like that. You remember vaguely a time when being seen felt like danger, when attention meant a predator, or competition, or simply the brutal randomness of the reef. But now, with age, with time, attention feels different, rare, precious even. You are not afraid to be seen anymore. You simply aren't seeking it. From below, a soft flicker of movement catches your eye. A stingray glides over the sand like a shadow pretending to be a bird. You can just make out its long tail trailing behind it, its body brushing a thin cloud from the seafloor as it passes. You remain still, watching it grow smaller and smaller
until it blends with the blur of light and dust. Everything here moves without hurrying. Even death, when it comes, seems to approach softly. You adjust your grip on a nearby frond and descend a little, rejoining the lower reef. You pass through a curtain of algae that brushes against your face like velvet. Inside, a small grove of coral fingers reach up like frozen flames. You've passed this way before, but it feels different now. A snail you once saw crawling along the base is gone. A clump of sponge you used to avoid, its texture too rough, too spongy, has shriveled. In its place, new growth has appeared. A pink fan coral, still tiny, swaying like it's unsure if it belongs yet. The reef always changes, slowly, gently, and with no regard for your memory of it. And yet the changes don't unsettle you anymore. You used to feel a twinge of discomfort when something familiar disappeared. Now you simply note it, then keep floating.
You spot something strange out of the corner of your eye, a flicker of color that doesn't belong. Something bright. Red? No, orange. It pulses and shimmers, darting behind a rock. You follow slowly, cautious but calm. When you round the corner, you see it, a nudra branch, small, soft, and adorned with ruffled gills like a flamenco dancer's skirt. It drifts forward with exaggerated grace, its body rippling in slow waves. It doesn't look at you. It doesn't even seem aware of you. But you're mesmerized. Such drama in a creature so small. It crawls across the coral, leaving behind no mark, no trail, just an impression in your memory. You know you'll never see it again. Nudra branches are like that. Brief visitors, tiny explosions of beauty that vanish as quickly as they appeared. You let it go. You don't need to chase it. It has already given you what you needed. Later, as you weave your way through a familiar tunnel of coral branches, you feel a shift in your own body. Not pain, not decline, just difference. A stiffness in your spine, a slight delay in your response to the current. It takes more effort to stay in place. Your grip on the grasses isn't as tight as it once was. You are changing too. Not suddenly, not alarmingly, just enough that you notice. You pause near a rock you've used many times as a lookout, curling your tail around its edge. The rock is worn smooth from time and tide, and you imagine the countless others who've rested here before you. Crabs, shrimp, other seahorses, maybe even one who looked like you, maybe not. You are not the first to pass through here, and you won't be the last. You watch a school of silversides flicker past. The way they twist and turn as one is hypnotic. You wonder what it's like to be part of such a crowd, to never be alone, to always have your next move dictated by the bodies around you. It must be exhausting and comforting. You wouldn't know. Your kind doesn't travel in schools. Your life has always been one of gentle solitude, broken only by brief encounters and longer memories. The day drifts toward its end, the water around you darkening with the steady approach of night. Colors soften, movements slow. Even the predators grow quiet, slipping into their dens or hiding places, waiting for the dark to give them permission to hunt again. You don't fear the night. You never have. The reef doesn't sleep, not truly, but it does settle. You settle with it. You find your usual perch, a stem of grass near the edge of the coral, and wrap your tail around it tightly. You face into the current, letting it brush your body clean of the day's particles. You blink, slow and deliberate. You breathe, soft and rhythmic. Your body glows faintly in the last traces of light. You are still here. You are always here. And the sea continues its slow, endless hum.
The night doesn't fall in the ocean the way it does on land. There's no sudden turning off of a switch, no sharp dividing line between light and dark. Instead, it fades in slowly, like a memory being gently erased from the sky. Up above, the sun drifts beyond the edge of the world, its rays growing more slanted, more filtered, more diluted by the shifting blue above. Down here, where you hover close to the seabed, the change is almost imperceptible at first, but gradually everything softens. Shadows stretch, colors dim. The reef takes a deep breath and exhales into evening. You remain suspended, tail coiled loosely around the stem of seaweed, not quite asleep, but no longer alert. In this state, you become something in between, not drifting, not anchored, just still. Your fins twitch occasionally, enough to keep you from tipping sideways, and your eyes, always moving, always scanning, slow to a near stop. Around you, the reef prepares for night. Day creatures tuck themselves into safe places. Parrotfish burrow into sand pockets. Crabs wedge themselves under ledges, and wrasses disappear into coral folds like bookmarks closing in on a well-read story. But others are just waking. You can feel it, a thrum, not quite heard, not quite felt, more like the tension in the water itself. It's not fear, it's just change. You see a shadow, long, sleek, purposeful, slice through the water. A reef shark, small but swift. It glides past you without a pause, its mind on other things, its hunger drawn by movement, not stillness. You know it won't bother with you. You are not on its menu. But you still watch it go, admiring the precision of its body, the way its tail flicks just enough to keep it level, the way it owns the space without ever seeming to try. That kind of power doesn't interest you. Not anymore. A little later, when the dark has fully settled, tiny specks of light begin to appear. Bioluminescence. At first, just a few. A faint green glow near a rock. A blue flicker from the tentacle of a drifting jelly. Then more. Soon the water is alive with quiet sparks, like a night sky flipped upside down and sunk into salt. You float through it slowly, a gentle comet in reverse, your body lit faintly by the sparks that dance in your wake. You don't chase them. You don't need to. Everything that glows comes to you eventually. The world at night is slower, yes, but also sharper in some ways. Sounds carry differently. The click of shrimp claws, the rustle of a crab against stone, the distant crunch of a parrotfish nibbling coral. All of it seems closer, clearer, as if the sea is whispering secrets only the patient can hear. You move through the silence with grace, your body barely displacing the water. You pass a garden of sea anemones, their tentacles waving in the unseen tide, each one pulsing with internal rhythm. You pause near one, not too close, you've learned to keep your distance, but close enough to admire the way it contracts and opens, like a heart with no body.
A shrimp darts out from beneath its folds, antennae twitching, claws raised in mock defense. It sees you and retreats. Or maybe it doesn't see you at all. Maybe it just reacts to shadow. You don't blame it. Life on the reef teaches you to distrust silhouettes. They're too often followed by teeth. You drift upward now toward the middle zone, where the water is neither shallow nor deep, where most things pass through but few remain. Here, the life from above is gone, and the glow from below is still distant. You are suspended in a kind of liquid dusk. It feels like memory, this place, familiar and vague, soft around the edges. You remember a time when you were young, so young you hadn't yet learned to wrap your tail properly, when the currents pushed you more than you pushed them. You remember the first time you saw a cuttlefish and thought it was a rock, until it blinked. You remember clinging to a piece of seaweed for hours during a storm, watching debris rush past like the thoughts of a panicked world. That storm had changed the landscape of the reef. You remember that too.
Coral broken, sand turned up, new crevices formed where there had been none before. After that, everything felt new for a while. Now, most things feel known. Not boring, just familiar. Like rereading a book where you know how it ends but still enjoy the way the words unfold. You take comfort in the repetition. The same fish circling the same coral, the same shrimp digging the same tunnel, the same eel glaring from the same hole. Nothing here is truly static, but nothing tries too hard to surprise you either. You continue your glide, turning slightly with the current, letting it guide you around a large coral mound. A turtle sleeps nearby, half tucked beneath an overhang. Its shell is patterned like a map of a forgotten land, and its eyes remain closed even as a small fish cleans its flipper. You pause a respectful distance away. There's something sacred about watching another creature sleep, a kind of trust, even if unspoken. Farther along, a patch of bioluminescent plankton shimmers as you pass. You can see each pulse respond to your motion, like an applause too quiet to hear. It's beautiful, not dramatic, not overwhelming, just quietly beautiful. Eventually, you begin to descend again, drawn by the need to rest. You find your usual patch of seagrass, the same one you've returned to night after night. You coil your tail around its stem, feeling the familiar give and resistance of the plant. It holds you without gripping, supports you without asking. You let your fins still. Your breathing slows. The world outside continues. Crabs scuttle, jellies drift. Even now, a predator moves nearby, unseen by you, uninterested in you. But you are safe. You are part of the night, part of its rhythm, part of its hush. And as the hours pass, you remain there, unmoving, untouched, unbothered, suspended in the soft embrace of the sea.
By the time the light begins to return, you are already awake. Not because something has stirred you, but because you never fully sank into sleep. Seahorses don't sleep the way humans do. Not in stretches, not deeply, and certainly not with dreams about flying or missing school or arguing with people whose faces blur in the morning. Your rest is a kind of drifting awareness, a half slumber where your tail remains curled around the grass, your body floats with the pulse of the sea, and your mind becomes a soft ripple rather than a sharp thought. The sky above shifts almost imperceptibly. You don't see it, but you feel it. The water changes its tone. The dark is not so absolute anymore. The edges of things begin to reappear, as if the ocean were exhaling shadows and inhaling color. Shapes return. Your seagrass, now green again instead of charcoal. The coral mound dappled with pink and orange. Your own fins shimmer faintly, catching the earliest rays that manage to scatter down from the surface. A new day has begun, but nothing rushes. The sea doesn't do abrupt. Even the sun arrives like a shy guest, peeking in slowly, inch by inch. You uncoil your tail, stretch slightly, and drift upward a few body lengths, letting the morning current carry you like a feather caught in a yawn. There's a pattern to your mornings, and today follows it without complaint. You move from your sleeping grass to a nearby coral ledge that's always a little warmer, always catching a pocket of sun. You linger there for a while, letting the light rest on your ridged back like a blanket. Nearby, a small school of damselfish darts in and out of a crevice, chasing one another in loops that seem to serve no purpose other than joy. You watch them for a while. You've never felt the urge to chase, or maybe you have, but long ago. Either way, you're content to observe. You begin your slow feeding ritual. You don't hunt like sharks or wait like anemones. You sip. That's the best word for it. Tiny snout to the current, you suck in microscopic crustaceans, plankton, whatever the sea offers this morning. It's a quiet, unceremonious breakfast, and it suits you. No chewing, no tearing, no drama, just intake. Now and then, a shrimp tries to swim away at the last second,
but your aim is practiced and calm. You miss more often than you hit, but that's all right. You are not starving. You never are. You take what you need, and the sea, most days, gives enough. A large shadow passes overhead, a sea turtle heading toward the open shallows. You tilt your head to follow its shape, noting how even something that big moves with near silence. You admire that. Not the size, but the silence. It's the kind of mastery that comes not from power, but from time. You swim slowly toward a spot where the coral blooms higher, forming arches and caverns that shift with the tide. This part of the reef has always reminded you of old ruins, columns and courtyards made of living stone, rooms where no one ever lived but which still feel inhabited. Here, you take your time. You pass beneath overhangs, drift past sponges that smell faintly metallic, and greet familiar faces. A goby you've seen before waggles its tail at you from its sandy hole. A brittle star hangs limply from a rock, one leg twitching as if in its sleep.
You make your way to a particular crevice near the base of a boulder, an area overgrown with sea moss and a kind of red algae that looks like spilled ink. Here is where you sometimes find eggs. Not yours, not now, but the idea lingers in the water. You remember what it was like, the time you carried the eggs. Yes, you. It surprises many land dwellers, but in your world, it's the males who carry the young. You remember the weight, though it was more of a fullness than a burden. You remember how your belly swelled with life, how your balance shifted, how you moved slower, more carefully, how you avoided sharp rocks and strong currents and anything that smelled too much like teeth. You remember the strange tickling from inside, movement, the kind that felt both alien and familiar. Life inside you, dozens of tiny selves forming piece by piece, bone by bone, tail by tail. And then, when the time came, you remember releasing them into the water, not with grandeur. There was no applause, no gentle music, just a series of rhythmic spasms, your body arcing, tensing, expelling one small curled seahorse after another into the sea's cradling arms. They wriggled, blinked, and immediately scattered, not looking back, not even knowing you existed. That was the hardest part, and the most beautiful. You don't know how many survived. Maybe none, maybe one, maybe dozens. That's not your business anymore. Your job was to carry and to let go, and you did. You pass through a narrow corridor between two coral towers and emerge into a wider basin. This place is quieter, less populated, a kind of forgotten courtyard of the reef. Here, long eelgrass sways in slow circles, and the only other life you see is a sea cucumber lying like a forgotten sock near a rock. You float for a long time in this space, letting your thoughts, such as they are, drift outward. You begin to think not about today or yesterday, but about your shape, yourself, the way your bones curl inside your body, the way your snout narrows to a perfect straw, the way your eyes move independently, scanning opposite directions, always checking, always watching. You are strange, and yet you've always fit. The sea is filled with strangeness. That's the point. That's the beauty. You turn slowly, letting the current guide you back toward the denser reef. A pair of clownfish hover near an anemone, guarding something invisible. You nod, or the seahorse equivalent of nodding, a nod of recognition, of mutual oddity. You both exist in a world where logic takes a back seat to survival and art. A bit farther along, you pass a rock outcropping and find yourself nose to nose with a pufferfish. It doesn't puff, it just stares. You stare back. Its eyes are large and full of questions. Yours are smaller and more resigned. After a long moment,
you both drift apart. The afternoon thickens. The water warms slightly. Somewhere distant, a dolphin clicks. You don't see it, but you hear the sound, like a thought passing through the back of your mind. You move on. Eventually, you return to your resting grass, not to sleep, not yet, but to perch, to pause, to let the moment hold you like always. You're still here, and the sea, once again, hums in quiet agreement.
The day turns slowly but inevitably, like the tide that doesn't ask for permission to change. The sunlight filters through in a different angle now, softer and more golden than before, casting the reef in a warmer hue, as though the ocean itself were slipping into something more comfortable. You remain in your grass, holding on with that curled tail of yours, your body swaying slightly with the rhythm of the current, which is picked up only marginally, enough to remind you that time is moving even if your thoughts are not. You feel it in your bones, or rather in the plates that line your body like flexible armor. You're still recovering. It's been a little while now since you gave birth, but your body is slow to bounce back. That's the thing about being the one who carries life. You get left with the aftermath. Your pouch, once full and taut and oddly glowing with promise, now hangs loosely, like a balloon after a party. There's no fanfare, no special choral choir to welcome you back to normalcy. The ocean does not applaud your efforts. It continues on, just as before. Your mate had visited briefly after the birth. You'd performed the ritual greeting, your tails had twirled together, your bodies had mirrored each other's movements in a slow, graceful dance. It had been brief, wordless, necessary. Then they had floated away, perhaps to find food or to ponder life beneath a sea sponge. You hadn't followed. You'd stayed. You always stay. The world moves around you, and you hold still. Sometimes the stillness is a relief. Other times, it's a weight. You drift a little now, just far enough to shift perspective. The reef looks different from a new angle. Colors shift. Shadows change shape. From here, the same coral that looked like an open hand now resembles a clenched fist. The sea does this to you. It redefines the familiar simply by changing how you see it. You've come to appreciate that. But even in your drifting, your body moves more slowly than it used to. There's a stiffness now, subtle but present, especially around your lower segments. You suspect it's part recovery, part age. You're not old by Seahorse standards, but you're no hatchling either. You've lived through seasons, you've endured storms, you've carried generations, and now your joints creak, not in sound, but in motion. The grass you wrap around feels a little rougher, the current feels a little stronger, or perhaps you're just a little softer. A small crab scuttles across a nearby rock, its legs ticking like wind-up toys. It doesn't see you, or perhaps it does and doesn't care. You don't pose a threat. You're not here to fight or feed. You're just part of the scenery now, a background presence in someone else's little adventure. The crab disappears into a hole, and you're left with the echo of its movement, the faint reminder that life continues around you, indifferent to your personal narrative arc.
A school of silvery fish darts past you, each one perfectly aligned with the others, their motion a singular thought stretched across multiple bodies. You blink slowly. It's beautiful in a mathematical way, efficient, precise. You've never swum in a group like that. Seahorses aren't built for unity. You live alongside, not within. Even with your mate, even in courtship, even during the long bonding dances, you've always been separate, touching, but never quite fused. Always a beat behind or ahead. And maybe that's part of your nature, solitude, without loneliness. Your stomach tightens, gently reminding you it's time to eat again. You uncurl from the grass and make your way toward your usual feeding ground, where the current sweeps across a sandy trench rich with plankton and copepods. The water here is slightly cooler, clearer too, and you hover just above the silt, your body almost vertical, tail trailing slightly behind like a forgotten ribbon. You begin your feeding with slow, deliberate sips. Your snout functions like a tiny vacuum, slurping up microscopic morsels you can neither see nor name. They're there, though. You feel the resistance when you inhale. You feel the faint satisfaction that comes from consumption. There's no chewing, no crunch, just the intake of energy and the knowledge that, for now, you'll keep going. A jellyfish wafts nearby, translucent, pulsing, eerily calm. You freeze. It's not a predator, not really, but its presence is enough to make you pause. You've seen others get too close and suffer the sting. You admire it from a distance. It's beautiful in a way that demands space, like fire or a storm cloud or regret. Eventually, it drifts away, and so do you. Back at the base of a coral tower, you find an old shell, a spiral once belonging to a snail long gone. You don't need it for shelter. You don't use shells the way some others do. But still, you turn toward it. There's something comforting about its curve. It reminds you of your tail, of your own spiraled shape, of the way life folds in on itself. You press your tail against the algae-covered stone and let yourself anchor once again. The day begins to dim. The ocean has its own form of dusk. Colors flatten. Light retreats. The reef quiets. Not in silence, but in tone. The background hum of movement becomes softer. Fish slow down. Crustaceans retreat. Even the currents seem to shift into a lower gear. You don't sleep yet, but you prepare. Your breathing slows. Your gaze drifts. You start to feel the weight of the water again, not in a threatening way, but in a cradling one. Like a blanket pulled over you by a hand made of tide. You curl your tail, not tightly, just enough. And then you wait. Not for something to happen, but simply because waiting is part of being.
Some mornings arrive with a rustle, others with a hum. Today, it's a whispering tide that wakes you, one that slips through the crevices of coral and rolls across the sand with all the urgency of a sigh. The light is pale and slow to arrive, barely pressing through the water. And when it does, it falls on your body in long golden stripes, like sunbeams dragged underwater. You stir without opening your eyes fully, sensing rather than seeing that the reef is waking up again. You uncurl your tail gently, testing it against the current. It holds, but only loosely now, like a promise no longer needed. You drift upward slightly, body vertical, fins fluttering like a pair of sleepy thoughts. The world is quiet still, but not silent, just muted. There's the soft rasp of sand being stirred by a passing wrasse, the faint click of a crab rearranging its tiny home, the delicate ripple of seaweed responding to the tide's whims. Everything is as it was, and slightly different. That's the way of things here. Constant change wrapped in repetition. You navigate toward the shallows today, where the water is warmer and the vegetation thicker, tangling together in waving walls of green. You prefer the open spaces usually, but now and then it feels good to disappear into the busyness of the blades, to let the world become a blur of movement and shadow. In here, your body is almost invisible. The stripes that run down your back, muted brown and faint cream, blend with the seagrass. You are not hiding exactly. You are participating in the quiet game of don't be noticed, which the ocean plays endlessly. A juvenile octopus crosses your path, gliding with that strange liquid motion, its tentacles folding and unfolding like thoughts too complex to express.
It eyes you briefly with one horizontal pupil, then veers off. You respect its decision. Octopuses don't linger unless they want something. And you, today, are not offering anything. You pause near a patch of algae-covered stone and just watch. A goby darts between rocks. A feather star sways gently, arms outstretched like a performer who forgot the routine but dances anyway. A brittle star slinks beneath a coral overhang, leaving behind only the faint wiggle of its last leg. You don't move much. You don't have to. The sea moves for you, and if you let it, it will carry you to places you didn't know you needed to be. Later, a current brushes through, stronger than usual. It tugs at your body, spinning you slightly before you correct your posture with a slow, backward tilt. Your dorsal fin hums against the water, steady and small. You resist just enough to stay upright, to stay where you are. The current brings smells, faint and layered. The scent of broken coral, the distant hint of algae bloom, something sharp that might be fish blood. You don't react to that last one. You're not a predator, not in that sense. Your world runs on patience, not pursuit.
You drift again, just enough to clear the tall grass. Above you, sunlight glitters across the water's ceiling, sending ribbons of gold and silver snaking down through the blue. You move toward a familiar branch of coral, a stubby red one, weathered and cracked, but strong. It's been here longer than you, probably longer than your parents. You anchor yourself to it with your tail, wrapping around the same worn edge as always. It fits you. You fit it. That's enough. A damselfish buzzes past, defensive as ever. It's guarding a patch of algae that only it cares about, snapping at anything within range, including you. You hold your ground and let it pass. It flutters away angrily, triumphant in a battle you never agreed to fight. You sigh. Not every species values peace the way you do. A memory nudges you, not sharp, not urgent, just a bubble rising to the surface of your mind. You recall your early days, the weeks after you hatched, how everything was motion then, chaos. You had no anchoring point, no coral you could call familiar, just open water and instinct. You remember the silhouettes of predators that haunted the edges of your vision, the struggle to find food in clouds of silt, the days you drifted without purpose or plan, following currents like a leaf carried by wind. And now look at you, a veteran of stillness. It's easy to think of your life in terms of movement, how far you've drifted, how long you've hovered, but your true growth has always been in the art of staying put, in learning which rock is too sharp to hold, which seaweed is too slippery, which current lies, in knowing that sometimes the smartest thing to do is wait. Today, the waiting feels good, not heavy, not hollow, just peaceful. A pair of pipefish glides past. They don't acknowledge you, but you sense a kinship. Like you, they prefer upright posture, slow motion, and quiet. You admire their elegance. They disappear into the grass, a whisper leaving the room. You stay for a while longer, body swaying, eyes half-lidded. Occasionally, a shrimp skips by, or a small snail drags itself across a leaf. The moments stretch, not boring, but deliberate, like time unfolding at a pace you can finally understand. Eventually, you uncurl again, not because you have to, just because. You let yourself rise, gently, toward the higher reef, where the light breaks in clearer beams and the world feels wider. You pass an anemone, its tentacles tucked in for now, and a blue tang weaving between crevices like it's late for something. You are not late. You are not early. You are exactly where you're supposed to be. And sometimes, that's all the reassurance you need.
The seasons in the ocean do not change with sudden drama. There are no falling leaves or springtime blooms, no snow drifts or bird calls to mark transitions. Instead, the sea changes in subtleties. Water temperature dropping by degrees so slowly that you only notice when your body begins to respond without your mind fully grasping why. Today, the current carries a colder breath. It swirls around your body like a silk scarf soaked in winter, and you feel it seep into the small spaces between your armor plates, making you curl your tail a little tighter without thinking. The sun doesn't rise quite as high now. Its beams strike the surface at a softer angle and fade earlier than they did before. Light, which once reached even the reef's deeper ledges in warm golden lines, now filters down in fainter threads, thin and diluted, like old paint washed in too much water. And with the dimmer light comes a quieter reef. Fish slower to stir, seagrass swaying more lazily, crustaceans spending longer stretches tucked under their rocky ceilings. You are among them, half hiding in habit and half in necessity. Your appetite isn't quite the same. It comes in waves, like the tide, sometimes sharp and demanding, other times soft and forgettable. Hunting, or rather grazing, has become more of a meditation. You float near the same patch of algae-choked stones, not moving much, snout twitching only when the tiniest dot of movement catches your eye. A copepod, a larval shrimp. You snap them up, gently, methodically. It's not hunger that drives you now, but the comfort of the routine, that and the quiet satisfaction of existing. There is a turtle today, a big one, older than you, older than almost anyone in your part of the reef. It passes slowly overhead, its massive limbs pushing against the water like a dream too large to fully comprehend. Its shell is etched with algae and scars, each mark a timeline you'll never understand. You don't move as it glides past. You just watch, as still as coral, as silent as the sand. The turtle doesn't look down. It doesn't need to. Its world is vast and deep, its memory long. But in that moment, something in its eye catches you, a glint, a curve of light, a slow rotation, and for a moment, it's like you are seen. Then, it's gone, like all great things, without a splash or a sound, just a steady retreat into the blue. Your body aches a little when you shift. It's not painful, not alarming, but different. You've been in this water through many moons now. Each day, your movements feel just slightly more careful. You no longer dart when startled, you tilt. You no longer flinch at shadows, you observe. These are not signs of weakness. These are the rituals of someone who has learned that panic is expensive and stillness is wisdom.
You drift to the shallower grass, where the blades are denser, thicker, a darker green now. Many of them are touched by the season too, browning at the edges, curling slightly, waving less cheerfully than they used to. But they still offer shelter, and so you weave among them, letting your tail graze against the familiar stems. Some are familiar enough that you know their bends. You know which ones flex gently and which ones resist. It's a kind of memory, isn't it? Not the human kind, with words and shapes and names, but the memory of presence, of having been here before, and again, and again, and again. A young seahorse passes you, smaller than you, thinner, brighter in color. Its movements are jittery, as if it hasn't yet learned that the ocean doesn't reward haste. It bumps into a stem, spins in a flurry of bubbles, rights itself, and then zooms away with wild flaps of its dorsal fin. You blink slowly. You remember being like that. It's exhausting just to watch. You shift downward again, toward a quiet nook beneath a coral overhang where the current slows and sound becomes softer. You anchor yourself and let the world fall away a bit. There is no rush. You've lived too long to believe in urgency. There's always another tide, another dusk, another time to eat or dance or drift. Your breathing slows. Your snout hovers just above a patch of dusted sand. You watch a hermit crab change homes, dragging one shell behind it, investigating another. It pauses, climbs in, backs out, climbs in again. A process, a decision. You wonder what it's thinking, if it's thinking at all, or just responding to some internal code too deep for even it to question. Around you, the reef hums, not loudly, not even musically, but it hums, the way a room hums when everyone's asleep and the refrigerator sings its quiet little tune to itself. There's a peace in that, the kind that doesn't ask questions or demand reactions, just exists. Somewhere above, a school of fish turn sharply in unison. Their silver scales catch what little light filters through, and for a moment, it looks like the ocean is shrugging on a sequin scarf. You watch it fade. That's the thing about beauty here. It doesn't wait. It just is, and then it isn't. And yet nothing is lost. You've learned this. Everything returns in some form. The current that sweeps away the shimmer will someday return with food. The darkness that takes the reef at night will lift again in a day or two. Even the chill that now makes your tail curl tighter is not permanent. You've lived through colder waters before. You will again. Or not. Either way, you don't resist. Your body now feels heavier than it did earlier. It takes more energy to float where it once felt like gliding. You wrap your tail tighter, not out of fear, not out of pain, but because it's nice to be held, even if it's a blade of seagrass, even if the embrace is one you've given yourself. The reef prepares for night slowly. Colors deepen, shadows stretch. The clownfish hide, the anemones close. You remain for a moment longer, floating just above the grass, watching, breathing. You are not tired in the way a swimmer gets tired. You are tired in the way a tide retreats, gradually, gracefully, unconcerned. And so, with the patience of something older than worry, you let yourself settle once more, not into sleep, but into softness, into surrender, into stillness.
Night in the reef is not a silence, but a change in rhythm. The bright flickers of daylight fish give way to the deeper glows of nocturnal wanderers. The colors dim, but they do not vanish. They merely shift. You, already accustomed to the stillness of twilight, find yourself gently adjusting to the newer shade of quiet. The water feels denser now, as though infused with whispers and softened echoes. This is a different kind of ocean, a lullaby sea, with a tempo slow enough to feel like a breath held, then released. You stir slightly, just enough to let the current lift you from your coil of grass. You don't rise high, only enough to let the drifting water cradle you, like hands too gentle to be noticed. Above you, the moonlight filters through the surface in long silver waves, so faint they seem drawn with memory more than light. It plays along the sand in broad, ghostly streaks, pooling in the crevices of coral and over the backs of sleeping creatures. You hover in the middle, neither hiding nor revealing yourself, just existing. A group of flashlight fish glides past, their tiny bioluminescent organs blinking like lanterns in the dark. It's mesmerizing, like watching stars swim. Their glow touches the tips of the seagrass around you and briefly casts your silhouette against the reef wall. Then they're gone again, absorbed by the blue-black folds of night. You drift with the flow for a while, letting it carry you near a shallow ledge you once used as shelter when you were much younger. It hasn't changed much. The rock is still worn smooth on one side and chipped like a broken tooth on the other. A sleeping cardinalfish has taken residence here now, breathing slowly, gently rocking with the pulse of the sea. You don't disturb it. You just take your place nearby,
curling your tail around a stub of coral as familiar as any anchor. Your body tilts forward slightly, your eyes half-lidded, your snout pointed downward in a motionless nod. There is peace in being still here, in being forgotten by the rush of things. Occasionally, a shadow passes overhead. A reef shark patrols the outskirts. Not hunting right now, just gliding, as they often do, as if pulled by thoughts deeper than instinct. You don't fear it, not anymore. If it notices you at all, it doesn't show it.
You're too small to bother with, too motionless to invite interest. You are part of the reef's furniture now, the quiet upholstery of the seascape. No threat, no meal, just there. Beneath you, something moves with the sand. A decorator crab, dragging half the reef on its back, clambers forward with the awkward determination of a creature pretending to be everything except what it is. You watch it pause and rearrange a strand of algae on its shell, adjusting its disguise with what seems like pride. You smile inwardly, or at least the seahorse equivalent of a smile. You can't quite remember how that feels anymore, but the warmth is there. It's enough. Your body doesn't ache tonight. Not quite, but it hums. A quiet, deep hum that feels like memory trapped inside your armor. Your joints are slower to respond, your fins less eager to flutter. This too is a kind of change, not unwelcome, just undeniable. You remember your first courtship dance, how bright the water was, how your body twirled without resistance, how your tail reached out with such certainty. That joy remains somewhere inside you, softened by time but never erased. You even remember the moment you realized you were the one who'd carry the eggs. How strange that had seemed at first, how obvious it became later. Now, as the water cools even further, you notice that your thoughts linger more often in places like that. Memories not of survival, but of stillness, of connection, of rhythms shared. You drift back toward the outer edge of the seagrass. Not far, just a few tail lengths. It's quieter there, and you can feel the slow exhale of the open sea brushing against the reef like a goodbye it doesn't know it's saying. A passing jellyfish glows faintly in the distance. Its body pulses with an indifferent grace, trailing thin, ribbon-like tentacles behind it. It reminds you of something, perhaps a dream, or maybe the shape of time itself. It never hurries, yet it always moves forward. You watch it drift past like a thought you didn't catch in time. Your perch now is a pale green blade of grass, weathered at the tip, soft and pliable. You wrap your tail around it slowly, not with urgency, not out of fear, but because you want to stay here a little longer. The current shifts around you gently. It doesn't push, it invites, and you stay.
Beneath you, the sand has taken on a cooler hue. A thin film of sediment rides the seabed like fog. Occasionally, a worm stirs just beneath it, tracing invisible lines beneath the surface. You notice these things more now, details, small movements, the way a coral polyp retracts when touched by a particle of light. The precise moment when two currents meet and create a spiral that lasts all of 3 seconds before it disappears. The world has grown quiet, and so have you. You watch the horizon, not that you call it that exactly. It's where the blue fades into darker blue, where the reef meets the open sea, and beyond that, the drop-off. You've never ventured there, never needed to. That's the territory of others. The rays, the pelagics, the bold and restless. You belong here, with the seagrass, with the gentle folds of coral, with the things that know how to wait. A sudden sparkle in the water reminds you of bioluminescent plankton, though it's early for them, or late. Time is elastic here. You don't count the days, you count the tides, the returns, the silences. You count the times you find your tail wrapped around the same stem and the times you forget whether it was the same one or merely close enough to pretend. You begin to let go, not fully, not yet, but slightly, enough to drift again, just a little, letting your body sway with the pulse of water. You're not tired, but you are ready. That's different. The fish sleep, the coral folds inward, even the shrimp pause their endless rearranging, and you simply hover. You close your eyes, or rather, you slow your blinking to something so soft it becomes indistinguishable from rest. And in that near sleep, you imagine something, not a dream exactly, but an image. A bright bay, shallow and warm, thick with seagrass. Tiny seahorses flickering in and out of view like sparks in the tide. And you, not watching, but part of it. And if that image fades with the current, if it floats away like a piece of broken shell, you let it. Because here, in the hush of night, the sea is more memory than place, and you are not separate from it. You are the hum, the drift, the stillness.
You wake, or perhaps you never truly slept. In the sea, the boundary between waking and resting is fluid, like everything else. The water is dim but not yet dark, as if the day itself is hesitating, unsure whether to rise or retreat. Around you, the reef is slow to stir. A goby flicks its fin but doesn't leave its burrow. A feather star stretches one arm cautiously, then curls it back again. Even the current seems reluctant, dragging its feet like a child summoned too early from dreams. You feel this hesitance in your own body. Your movements are more deliberate now, more measured. Not from pain, just wisdom. You know there's no need to rush. Your muscles remember how to swim, how to curl, how to anchor, but they now prefer stillness. You drift upward gently, just a few inches, rising with a slow spiral, your body swaying with that familiar rhythm you've known since you were no bigger than a grain of rice. You don't need to see where you're going. You already know. The spot you reach is familiar. A pocket of open water framed by seagrass and a low rock arch where a colony of limpets clings in perfect rows. It's quiet here, always has been. You've returned to this spot again and again across cycles and seasons. Something about it calms you. Maybe it's the shape of the current, how it loops here gently like a lazy eddy in a forgotten pool. Maybe it's the way light from the surface collects in a slow-moving glow that never feels rushed, never feels sharp. Maybe it's just yours. You curl your tail slowly, deliberately, around a slim stalk of swaying weed. The motion is familiar, almost ritual. You hold yourself there, floating slightly with the rhythm of the sea, feeling the sway and pull that cradles you, as if the ocean itself remembers how to hold you. You breathe gently, not because you're tired, but because there's nothing demanding your attention. Nothing to chase, nothing to fear. Not anymore. A pair of cuttlefish pass nearby. They don't notice you, or maybe they do and choose not to acknowledge you. Either way, their bodies ripple with iridescent pulses, flashes of color like thoughts made visible. They change hue as they swim, shifting from soft gray to silver to blush pink, and then back again. Their colors seem to speak in languages you'll never understand. You admire them without envy. You've never needed spectacle to be seen. Your existence is quieter, yes, but no less real. Your body feels different today. You notice it more keenly. A stiffness in your midsection, a weight in your snout. Not pain, just age. The kind of age that's earned, not suffered. Your spine curves more, your colors have dulled to soft earth tones, and your dorsal fin flutters slower now. But there is still grace in your shape, even now, especially now. You no longer blend into the background by accident. You do it with intention. There's a dignity in invisibility, a quiet pride in being part of the scenery rather than the performance. You spot a young seahorse nearby, not a hatchling, but still small. It tries to match the current's pace but fails, overshooting, twisting, correcting itself with clumsy flicks. You remember being like that, restless, eager, uncertain. You remember what it felt like to not yet know that there's no rush, that the sea will always move, with or without you. The young one darts too fast and startles a pipefish that coils sharply and vanishes.
The seahorse hesitates, chastened, then floats off slowly. You don't follow. You don't need to. Everything you need is already around you. The sea today is dense with sound, but it's the soft kind, ambient, consistent, like breath. Snapping shrimp click in the distance. The coral exhales through invisible mouths. Even your own joints, as tiny as they are, creak slightly with movement, like old hinges on a well-loved door. It's comforting, this chorus of age. You are not alone in it. The whole reef knows this language. And just as you begin to sink into stillness again, a storm arrives. Not a violent one, not yet, but the signs are there. The current tightens its grip. The light becomes murkier, infused with stirred-up silt. The fish dart lower. Even the coral seems to brace. You remain anchored, your tail firm around your chosen blade of seagrass. You do not panic. You've lived through many of these. You've learned when to resist and when to yield. The first wave of turbulence arrives like a jolt. A rush of current throws a blanket of fine particles across the reef. It doesn't hurt, it just blinds you briefly, clouds your vision like a memory you didn't expect. But you hold fast. Your armor takes the hit, your body absorbing the pressure like it has countless times before. You remain still. This is what survival looks like. Not always fleeing, but sometimes simply waiting. The worst passes quickly. The reef absorbs the impact, like it always does. It bends, it shields, it hides. You wait a moment longer before loosening your grip. Around you, the water is still dusty, but calmer now. The storm will move on. They always do. What matters is that you are still here. And now, with the debris settling again, you exhale. Not with your lungs, because you don't have them, but with your spirit. A letting go. A release. Not of life, not yet, but of effort. You no longer try to swim against anything. You don't chase meaning. You just float. Even your thoughts seem to drift apart, like sand scattered by a gentle surge. You don't hold on to them. They come and go. You recall things, the feel of the pouch as it expanded with eggs, the dance of your mate before the transfer, the burst of hatchlings shooting into the water like glittering sparks. You remember the taste of a particularly fat brine shrimp, the shape of a shell you once mistook for a predator, the time you watched a moon snail for an entire tide, fascinated by its impossible slowness. Each memory rises, lingers, and then melts into the sea. And you allow it. You remain wrapped around your blade of grass, now tilted with the weight of the current, but still upright, still holding. You begin to sway again, as the reef begins to return to normal. The fish reappear. The light returns. You don't move much anymore. You don't need to. Your presence is enough. You are not young now, but you are whole. And that wholeness comes not from speed or shine, but from stillness. If this were to be your final tide, you wouldn't fear it. The sea has always known how to hold you, and if it someday decides to keep you, you would not resist. You have already given so much to it. Your movements, your dances, your silence, your breath. And it has given back in kind. But for now, you remain. One more dusk, one more current,
One more breath.
The reef at dusk is neither beginning nor ending. It simply is. The colors soften into purples and pale greens, as if the entire seafloor were exhaling at once. You drift just slightly above your usual perch now, no longer searching for food, no longer adjusting for better camouflage, no longer preparing for anything at all. The water surrounds you like memory. Everything is slower here, stretched out like the golden strands of a dream you never quite woke from. You don't fight the drift. You allow it to carry you gently over a slope you once knew well. The coral heads there are smaller than they used to be, some cracked from storms, others overgrown with delicate new polyps. It's strange how things can break and still grow. You're not surprised, of course. This is the way of things here. The reef is a lesson in continuity, where endings fold into beginnings so quietly no one bothers to announce the change. You feel older today, not heavier, not sad, just further along the loop. Your bones don't ache. Seahorses don't really have bones in the traditional sense, but you still feel something in your frame, a kind of soft quiet in the joints, a mellow creak in the bends of your body when you turn. It's not pain. It's simply time. Somewhere above, the light bends in faint halos, like the sun is dipping below the edge of the sea with a sigh. You remember how it used to dazzle you, how you once chased flecks of gold on the surface like a fool. But now you prefer the filtered glow that seeps through the water like candlelight through a silk curtain. It's enough. It's more than enough. Below you, tiny organisms drift. Plankton, larval fish, things so small they don't even seem to swim, only pulse and hover. They shimmer in the fading light like dust motes in a warm room. You used to chase them. Now you just watch. They don't know you're there. You've become part of the stillness, part of the current itself. There's a comfort in that, in being unremarkable, in being safe. You float past a bed of soft corals, fuzzy, pink-tipped colonies that sway like drowsy dancers in a tide too slow to measure. They tickle your tail as you pass, and you let yourself be nudged slightly to one side. No resistance, just cooperation. Your body barely makes a ripple. Once, you would have panicked at a touch like that. When you were young, every movement was a question. Is it a threat? Is it food? Is it something I don't understand? But now, there's nothing left you need to understand. Not in the usual sense. You've learned that knowing isn't always about naming. Sometimes it's just being close enough to feel. You settle near a low coral ledge, one of your old favorites. It's a little more worn now, its edges smoothed by tide and time. A small brittle star hides underneath it, arms twitching like slow clock hands. You wrap your tail around a sturdy stem nearby and allow your body to hang motionless. Not limp, just serene. The kind of stillness that only comes when there's nowhere left to go.
And still, the water moves. You listen. Not with ears, because you don't have them, but with the entire surface of your body. You sense the low thrum of the sea, the faint hum of movement, of distant things churning, of waves breaking far above your head. It all passes through you. You don't hold on to it. You let it pass. A school of silvery fish glides by, their bodies reflecting the last slivers of light like living moonbeams. You don't track them. You don't turn to watch. You simply feel their presence graze the water behind you, the shift in current they leave in their wake, the faint stirring of algae in their path, and then they're gone. You breathe, in your way. Water passes over your gills. Oxygen separates, enters your bloodstream, fuels your being. But it feels less like breathing now and more like merging. You are not taking from the ocean. You are participating in it. Your body, though dulled in color, still holds its shape. You know that. You are not breaking down, not yet. But you also sense that things are shifting. Inside you, some rhythms have slowed. The flick of your dorsal fin isn't as frequent. Your eyes don't track with the same sharpness. It's okay. The reef doesn't demand anything from you anymore. It only offers quiet, and you take it. You remember the pouch, the gentle swell of new life inside it, the pulse of future seahorses wriggling beneath your skin. That experience feels both recent and impossibly distant. You carried life once. You protected it, released it, watched it disappear into the sea like sparks flying off a log. You never saw them again. That's how it works here. Life bursts forward, and the sea takes it back. You wonder briefly if any of them survived, if any of them are out there now curling their tails around the same grasses, watching the same moonlight ripple across the sea floor. You hope so, but you don't cling to the thought. The ocean teaches you to let go. And so, in this moment, you begin to do just that. You ease the grip of your tail. You let yourself drift again, just enough to feel the water cradle you differently. You don't fall, you don't rise. You hover in that space between pull and push, in the delicate pause of a breath that never quite ends. You don't fear what comes next, not because you understand it, but because you trust it. The reef has never lied to you. It has never promised safety, only presence, only rhythm, only the assurance that no matter what changes, the current continues. And you are ready. You allow your eyes to soften. Your fins flutter one last time, not for motion, just as a reflex. The reef folds itself around you, not with arms, but with memory. You've become part of it now, not entirely gone, just dissolved into it. Your form will remain for a while, barely disturbed. Algae may cling, a curious snail may pass. Your body will change, as all things do, but slowly, softly, without spectacle. You are not leaving the sea, you are becoming it.
And now all movement softens. The reef dims with you, as if every coral, every blade of seagrass, every grain of sediment has quietly agreed to slow its breathing. Nothing startles, nothing stirs. Even the tide, tireless and vast, seems to hesitate just long enough to let you feel weightless, like the ocean itself has paused to hold you in the gentlest of silences. You are no longer just a part of the reef. You are the hush that steals over it, the steady warmth of water that stays after the sun has gone, the memory in the current, not a presence, but a feeling. The little things continue around you, so quietly, so peacefully. The tiniest of shrimp flicks a leg. A snail glides invisibly across the underside of a rock. A soft swirl of sand resettles, but none of it demands your attention. Nothing pulls you back. It's all just lullaby now, whispers in the background, gentle and warm. And you, floating there, no longer rising, no longer searching, are finally still. You've given the sea your days, your dances, your stillness, your breath, and now it gives you peace. Let the currents wrap around your memory. Let the world blur into softness. Let your breath, your body, your thoughts slip into the water's rhythm, slow, slow, slower still. You are safe now. Sleep.